area, and we're going to get a chance to see exactly what he's up to here. Now, there's a little bit of a mistake on our board here. It's actually Daniel Ballastin that won game one, but we are not going to let that worry us, my friends, because we have still got some great magic for you. It looks like Ritzy, he is on Death Shadow. He has got a Water Grave in play at the start of the game. He's taking a little bit of damage. Daniel Ballastin there, he is on full-on blue-white control there. Love a little bit of that.
That was really impressive, Riley. It's nice to have some voice from down under next to me here. But no, all wackiness ahead. We are having a matchup between Death Shadow and White-Blue Control. Death Shadow, the Grixis variation, just runs all the best one-mana interactive cards in the format, and then tries to win the game with effectively one-mana threats like Death Shadow and Gurmag Angler. To be able to even keep a Death Shadow around, you do need to get your life total to 12 or lower, and Street Wraith and all the painful mana base does help in that.
Yeah, Ritzy's done a pretty good job of knocking his life total down. Tim's just got back into the booth now. He's going to be able to give us coverage for the rest of this round here. And here we have an Inquisition of Kozilek, so that in addition to lowering his own life total, he's going to have a little bit more information about what he's going to have to work with. Path to Exile, Terminus, Vendilion Click, and there we have a Dispel as well. So a good mix of control elements, some of which are not going to be relevant just yet. But, I mean, that Vendilion Click, it can race if it needs to. It means that Mattia Ritzy going to have a few decisions on his head there. It's either going to be the Path, Dispel, or the Click. What do you think, Frank?
Well, Path to Exile is a super efficient answer to the big threats from the Death Shadow deck. And that would be my first inclination. But Ritzy has played this deck way more than I have, so I'll just easily defer to his judgment.
Looks like he's actually going for the Click there. Not too worried about the one-mana instance just yet. I mean, there's no reason for this Death Shadow deck to necessarily be all that aggressive. It can pick its spots in terms of when it actually starts deploying threats.
True. So Ritzy is probably content to go for a longer game. When you know that your opponent has Path to Exile and Dispel in hand, you know that you're not going to be keeping lots of threats around for long. But taking the Vendilion Click means that he doesn't want to be pressured by Ballastin anytime soon. And yeah, may just go for a longer value game.
We've got a little shadow here. It's going to become a big shadow soon enough as a Scalding Tarn comes down. That potentially another 3 points of damage that Mattia Ritzy can deal to himself to turn his 1-1 into a 4-4. Let's see how much damage he's going to be able to get in before Daniel Ballastin decides to pull the trigger on one of his various answers. Once it's a 4-4, it means that Mattia Ritzy's counter magic gets all the better.
Yeah, most notably Stubborn Denial. That's a key card in his deck. Once you have a creature with 4 power or greater, it turns into, well, mostly a 1-mana counterspell in this matchup, at least for non-creature spells, but those are the important ones to counter anyway.
So in principle there, Daniel Ballastin could have responded to the fetch land by using his Path to Exile there if he wanted to be sure that he wasn't going to face a Stubborn Denial that was going to be a problem.
Indeed.
In practice, that did not work out that way. So we have an attacking 4-4 at present Death Shadow.
It looks like Daniel is just taking the damage for now.
Life total is a resource.
Mm-hmm. Maybe he wants to keep his Path to Exile around for an even bigger threat. Although, not sure there are any in Mattia's deck. Well, Path to Exile or Dispel are not going to be helpful in stopping Liliana.
Yeah, the Last Hope does a lot of work in this matchup. Obviously, the plus ability doesn't necessarily kill a whole lot. Celestial Purge will stop it, though. That a nice sideboard card from Daniel Ballastin here. Just so you know, there is a slight error on our scoreboard here from our Time Walk match, which is a bit tricky for us to travel back in time and fix, unfortunately, which is that Daniel Ballastin is, in fact, a game up here in this game too, rather than a game down. So Tony Ramos Pascual, Alvaro Sanchez Lopez, and Ballastin actually looking pretty good here against the likes of Ortiz Sanchez and Ritzy here.
Yep. So I believe at this point the cards that Ritzy still knows from Ballastin's hand are Terminus, Dispel, Path to Exile, and a basic Plains.
Still a fair amount of information to work with. Always nice to have that extra bit of information, especially for these top players that can really make the most of it.
Mm-hmm. But I do think that if this matchup goes long, then it favors the white-blue control deck. The deck is just filled with powerful late-game cards ranging from Cryptic Command to Planeswalkers, whereas the Dead Shadow deck excels at well, the early to mid-game, just using mana-efficient threats to get on board quickly and protect them.
So Snapcaster Mage comes down and draws out the Dispel from Daniel Ballastin as Ritzy attempts to try and get a little bit more value out of playing more spells. He's still got some mana up though, and now he has an attacker if he so chooses. Field of Ruin though coming along to deal with Blood Crypt. Oh, slight pause on our video there. We'll just see if we can get that fixed up for you. Sometimes when you go on a time walk, you take a little moment to have a look at things, but we've now cleared that up and we're keeping on going.
It was just a momentary time freeze.
Time moving in all kinds of directions over here, but it's all right. We're kicking things back up now. Now, what do you think was the rationale behind using the Field of Ruin there, Frank? Because it seems a little out of place. It didn't feel like it was adding a huge amount of value.
Not a whole lot, but well, one thing that it does is that it fixes your own mana. Instead of a colorless land, you now have an island. Also, sometimes these Dead Shadow decks don't run a whole lot of red actual lands. So by just combining multiple Field of Ruins, sometimes you can just run the opponent out of like red producing lands. Sometimes there's only, say, a Steam Vent and a Blood Crypt, and that's it in the entire mana base.
Ancestral Vision being suspended there. It's going to take a few turns to tick down, but when it does, that's a whole load of cards. 3 cards being drawn by a single spell. Hard to argue with that rate.
Yeah, and the Snapcaster Mage only represents an, I was going to say an 8-turn clock. Hard casting Street Wraith. Yep, why not? Now it's suddenly a 3-turn clock, which means that this Terminus that Daniel still has in hand may have to be cast sometime soon.
Casting of Street Wraith is something that I think that we don't see very often, and I think I would like to see it a little bit more. There are certainly matchups where the Swamp Walk, especially on a Street Wraith, can be a big old problem. And the 3/4 body, I mean, it does add to the clock of what you're doing relatively well. If you've got the lands in play to cast it, every now and again, it's worth at least considering that you don't want to just be treating it as a free cycle every single time you find it.
True, true. But Daniel actually switches from a control deck into the aggro deck, recognizing that Ritzy had already dealt a whole bunch of damage to himself thanks to his painful mana base. He saw, well, I just need 2 attacks with Celestial Colonnade to close out this game. Well, if that works, why wouldn't I go for it? Don't even need to cast this Terminus. I can just go for the throat with my creature land.
Well, that second Street Wraith did get cycled, meaning that Mattia Ritzy's at 1. He is digging for an answer to Celestial Colonnade. Otherwise, that Ancestral Vision won't get to resolve because Daniel's already won the match.
Yep. I mean, there is something like Fatal Push in Ritzy's deck that could prove to be valuable on the next attack.
And it looks like Ritzy's put his hand on the table. It might be that he's having a little discussion with some of his teammates here, whether or not that's him doing a little bit of big deal at Little Rock, just hiding the details of his hand by doing the bluff of talking a lot, or in fact he's actually discussing an interesting line of play. You know, maybe he's just finding out where they want to go to dinner.
Well, is there an answer? There is the Fatal Push.
All right. Sold that one nicely. Now he's going to get to attack for 5. Daniel Ballastin entirely tapped out here. I mean, if there was any kind of pump, that would be enough to finish things off. But no, he just knocks his opponent down to 2. We are in a very tight race indeed. Unfortunately, though, there is another Celestial Colonnade. So if it works out that Daniel Ballastin has the appropriate mana to be able to activate it, Ritzy's still in a tough spot.
Yep. And actually the Terminus that I mentioned earlier from Daniel, it was discarded by a Colligan's Command earlier. So that's not even going to be an option anymore. Yeah, all of a sudden Ritzy is in the driver's seat. Although there are still Celestial Colonnades hanging around, so if Daniel could just play a land and connect with Celestial Colonnade on the next turn, he might still take this one.
Here we are. A couple of things just being checked there in the graveyard of Ballastin here. you can see there that the other two matches going on all locked up, one win apiece on either side. So this match about as tight as you'd care to make it. Another copy of Street Wraith being played here.
Street Wraith beat on it is. And
Shields
it's the
down.
land.
There's the land. There's the Celestial Colonnade. There's the handshake, because that is ultimately, even though what you can see on the graphics suggests that it would be going to a game 3 there, in actual point of fact, Daniel Ballestein did win his game 1, meaning that that one is the match. And then we have a little bit more magic going on our other tables here. So,
did Rizzi just reveal that he had another Fatal Push in hand? If so, seems a bit weird not to keep the mana up for that in the face of this Celestial Colonnade.
Yeah, kind of a rough spot there in terms of where he was at. But I guess that no guts, no glory in terms of what he was able to get going there. Maybe hoping to actually get the win.
Fair enough. Well, did not manage to get there. So now, if Tony Ramis Pascual or Alvaro Sanchez Lopez wins their final game, either one of them, their entire team will have taken the round. And the team that moves to 11-2 needs maybe a draw, maybe still a win in the next round to make it to the top 4. But the team that falls to 10-3 is almost surely out of top 4 contention.
Yeah, it's one of those things where the maths on the absolute details, often it doesn't come down until that final round where we actually look at the pairings, look at the exact nature of what's going on to try and figure out who's able to draw in, who needs a win. We've moved one of our other matches down to our feature video table here so we can bring you, well, potentially a conclusion to this overall series between the teams. So where previously we had Mattia Rizzi and Daniel Ballestein, we now have one of the other sets of players there. Not quite sure yet whether or not that's Christian Ortiz and Tommy Ramos Pascual, or indeed Francisco Sanchez and Alvaro Sanchez Lopez. But we will find out soon enough as these guys get playing.
Yep. And yeah, one more win for the team on the right side is going to be enough here. It was still an interesting matchup there between the Dead Shadow deck and the white-blue control deck. Kind of amusing to see the Celestial Colonnades take it down. Typically it is the Dead Shadow deck that is just attacking for lots of damage early on, and the control deck not caring about life totals at all until it has established complete control. But well, we have been seeing pretty weird games all weekend. My favorite one has still got to be the one between Jason Chung's mill deck and the Zhao Chosa's dredge deck, where the mill player and the dredge player both would like to mill over a bunch of cards from the dredge deck. It was just a fun interaction. Even though in the end, as it turned out, the extirpates and surgical extractions from the mill deck proved decisive.
Yeah, I think it's, if you're looking for a fun match to watch later on, maybe going back to the VODs at some point, if you just want to get a feel for how things have been going this weekend, the first round of day 2, i.e. round 9 it would be, that was the round that we got a chance to see that matchup, and it was very cool. I enjoyed it a great deal. Yep. But we are now going to get a chance to see the deciding game between Christian Ortiz and Tony Ramos Pascual. Each of these players we see on the European GP circuit pretty regularly. Familiar faces both, and we potentially are going to see one or other of them in our final 4 here, as a win definitely makes it a close thing on being in the top 4. A loss almost certainly will mean that dream will die.
Yeah, I believe Christian Ortiz on the left side is a prior GP champion in this format, actually, Team Unified Modern, and he's also on a team with other GP winners in Mattia Rizzi. Francisco Sanchez, don't think he has a GP trophy yet, but at least has a finalist appearance. So, indeed, as you mentioned, these are veterans and regulars on the European Grand Prix circuit.
And of course, Mattia Rizzi, he's been on a World Magic Cup winning team. We've got the World Magic Cup next weekend in Barcelona, starting from Friday. So please do check that out on twitch.tv/magic. Exactly where you are now is exactly where you should be in just a few days' time. But also, that means that Mattia Rizzi, good at team play. He was teamed up, obviously, with his countrymen there, able to put in a great performance. And I do wonder whether or not there are certain types of players who are just naturally well disposed to working with others, either in terms of keeping team spirits up, providing just the right amount of input when people need sort of a bit of support, either psychological or in terms of decision making. I mean, I think that there's a lot of players that gravitate towards team events because they like having the kind of emotional safety net of knowing that they've got teammates who can potentially get the wins if they're not finding them themselves, or just, be able to see and help out if there is anything going wrong in any particular game.
Yeah, it's more fun when you win or lose together as a team and have the support all sitting next to you. As Tony Ramos Pascual is mulliganing down to, what is this, 4 cards now? This doesn't look good for him.
I mean, he finally finds a hand that he can keep. This is the scry now, scrying to the bottom here with this hand of 4. Going to be a rough one. There's not very many decks in Modern that can reliably pull out the win on 4, though. It looks like Ortiz also having to take at least one mulligan here. Saw a little scry from him as well.
And in terms of matchup, it does look to be the Tron mirror match. Very likely to be regular Tron decks, not of the Eldrazi sort that we saw earlier, given that the mono-green Tron deck is way more popular.
So we have Mine and Power Plant in play. All right, so right now things going okay in terms of getting Tron pieces, all different Tron pieces in play thus far. And Ancient Stirrings will definitely help get Tony Ramos Pascual into a position where he can piece something together here. But it looks like he might be having to take a non-Urzatron land off this Ancient Stirrings in order to be able to get things going here. There is a Sylvan Scrying, which is interesting. Can't take that off an Ancient Stirrings, though. Does not work that way.
No, only colorless cards.
He goes for the big boy. I can respect this. You've gone on a mulligan down to 4. If you're going to Ancient Stirrings and not hit an Urzatron land, let's at least find the thing that could potentially win you the game if you do get up to the mana to be able to cast it.
Well, even then, it is going to be at least until turn 4 and likely later before that Ulamog can come down. But yeah, the fact that he takes such a big card with Ancient Stirrings does indicate that he might already have the natural Tron in hand.
I mean, that would be a thing of beauty. Your 4-count hand is one of each Urza land and then a Karn. Or maybe, on a 4-card hand, if you had full Urzatron plus an extra tower, and just, there is the tower there, let's see it. He can't take it with a Thought-Knot Seer, so there is the full Urzatron, a Surgical Extraction, and then Ugin. Wow. Sorry, Ulamog, apologies.
Yeah, actually, even despite mulliganing down to 4, Tony Ramos Pascual had the opportunity of going turn 3 Karn, which is the dream start for any Tron deck. That is one of the better mulligans to 4 that I've seen in quite a while.
Karn liberated, though. Oh, Karn, ruiner of dreams here. Aww. Taking out Urza's tower, meaning that the likelihood of any of this working out, very poor.
And now a Ghost Quarter 2.
Oh. I mean, at least the Surgical Extraction is in Tony Ramos Pascual's hand rather than the other way around, because if there was a Surgical Extraction follow-up here, that would be enough. And just so you know what's going on here, there is a handshake. That handshake, sadly, does not mean that it is Tony Ramos Pascual conceding and it all being over, because apparently we have just heard that Alvaro Sanchez Lopez, at the same time, he won his game, meaning that even though Tony had his mulligan, Alvaro, Daniel, they were able to piece it together, they picked it up, and they ultimately got the win. And that will mean that for them, Dream of Elimination stages still very much alive. We're getting really, really close here in terms of making it through to our elimination stages. Let's see whether or not we can find our final few players here as we get to the end, the last round of the Swiss here of Grand Prix Liverpool.